is Jalil Ali Mahama. I'm a Senior Economic Development Planning Officer with the Local Government Service of Ghana. I've been working with the Local Government Service for close to 10 years now, so I'm celebrating a decade of service to my country. I'm a trained policy analyst from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I have a master's in development policy and planning. I also run what I call the JAM initiative, which is basically aimed at mobilizing community resources to resolve community issues their own way. And I am a proud 2022 Mandela Washington Fellow. I was at the Michigan State University in East Lansing, a Civic Engagement track, and I'm very excited to be sharing my experiences with you today. Fellowship experience was life-changing, to say the least. We got opportunity to meet so many people that were very influential in terms of our professional growth and development. Personally, I got the opportunity to meet professionals from the other side, people that were doing similar things that I do back home. So I was privileged to have met the Economic Development Director for East Lansing, the city of East Lansing. That's their city council, and then the Lansing City Council as well. We shared experiences, things that we could collaborate on, and then the way forward. I mean, it's really about building lasting relationships for continued knowledge sharing and professional development. And so for me, that was one thing that really stood out. And then the leadership training, for instance, was quite, essential, because then as a young leader, it is important for you to know exactly what your strengths and weaknesses are. And so the leadership training, for instance, was a great eye-opener for me. I discovered my strengths, some weaknesses. I became more diversity conscious, because then most often we discriminate against team members, and then we do not engage everybody on a level playing ground as far as team building is concerned. Yeah, overall, I mean, it's opened my eye to so many things. I wish I did this earlier in my life, because then you really don't know what you don't know until you find out, and then you are like, wow. I mean, the experience was amazing. We had so much fun as well. I have been able to build, very great relationships with people who I'm still in touch with. In terms of the selection process, I really don't know if it was my work as an economic planning officer with the local government service that made it for me, or my initiative, which is the JAM initiative. I probably have to ask the panel that interviewed me. I have not had the opportunity to do that yet. But I think that one thing that stood out for me would be the fact that I was original. I made sure that I wrote all my essays on my own, and then I showed them to past fellows for their comments. And then that way, I was able to get my own original ideas and experiences into answering the essay questions. Read the instructions very carefully. Okay, sometimes people have applied over and over and over again, and so they think that it is pretty straightforward. I mean, you just see the question and you start answering. Take your time. Read all the instructions under the question and know exactly what they are expecting you to write. Okay, some questions require certain formats. Okay, so be sure to write it in the same format that they requested. Some require you to write it in the past tense, some require you to write it in the third person, all of those things. So be very sure to read the instructions very carefully, and then be very original. I mean, this is not a do or die affair. It is just you telling them about your experiences, your leadership so far, your accomplishments, and if it is worth, calling you for an interview, they would do that. I see on social media a lot of people making comments about the fact that they already have people that they want to select and so on and so forth. I mean, last year I was watching a similar video. I applied normally like any ordinary person would do, and today I am here. As much as possible to read the questions very carefully. The first question, for instance, brief description of any major professional accomplishments within the last year and your long-term goals and aspirations and why you have chosen this work. So I always encourage applicants to stick to one thematic area. So if it is civic engagement that you have chosen and you are probably working in community development, for instance, stick to that. Don't jam up too many things. I know a lot of you have a lot of accomplishments here and there. Most of us did, but you really have to stick to one professional accomplishment over the last year or two. Be very specific about it. And it's really about impact. Okay, so find something that you did that had the greatest impact on your team, on your organization, on your beneficiaries, for instance, and then just tell them about it. So for me, I work in community development, so my essays were all revolving around public engagement as part of community development. Okay, so the first question, for instance, I spoke about the fact that I had engaged close to 400 communities prior to the preparation of a medium-term development plan for my local government authority. And then due to how, inclusive I made the engagement, there was, a complete buy-in by all the stakeholders, and all of them are ready to, assist in implementing the strategies that we have in the plan. It stood out. I mean, I used my leadership qualities, as far as transparency and participatory, approaches were concerned and all of that. And the second part of it has to do with your long-term goals and aspirations. And so here is like where you see yourself in the next 5 years kind of question. I specifically mentioned the fact that I'm a development planning officer, and then that offers me the opportunity to ensure the judicious use of scarce public resources with the full involvement of citizens. And so my long-term goal was to build a successful career in community development work and to see a well-informed citizenry playing active roles in their local governance. As simple as that. And you should be very careful about the word count as well, because you can't really go beyond that. What skills and knowledge do you hope to gain from the fellowship? So with this question, for instance, you really have to read about the preferred track that you have chosen and know exactly what you are going to get from that track, and use that to answer these questions. You really want to touch on some of the voluntary activities that you have done over the years. Okay, volunteerism isn't very big in our part of the world. People really want to be paid for everything that you do. And so, this question essentially wants to know what you have been doing in terms of voluntary work. Okay, so I started this question by re-echoing my long-term goal, for instance, and as a result of that goal that I have in mind, I have been working with NGOs, I've been working with my own non-profit, I've been working with voluntary organizations, and I mentioned a few examples of stuff that I had done, what I really seek to achieve from all those voluntary interventions that I had I had also, done. And that is the last part of the question, which says, and what else do you hope to accomplish in the future? So you go on about what it is. So for me, I ended by talking about my nonprofit and how I aim to empower citizens to mobilize their own resources to serve the needs of, their communities. And then when it comes to the issue of diversity, inclusion, and all of that, provide a specific example of how you have committed yourself to these values in your professional or personal life. And again, stick to the first issue that you spoke about as your major professional accomplishment. And I'm sure that you can get a good example out of that accomplishment where you ensured equity, diversity, and inclusion of everybody. So for me, because I was talking about public engagement, I spoke about the fact that I made sure I invited vulnerable groups. I made sure that I gave equal opportunities for the participants at the meeting to be able to air their views, because most often you invite people and then it's a one-man show. Just one person steals the whole show and it's always the one talking and all of that. So you have to ensure equal opportunities. You give everybody the opportunity to be able to express their opinions, and you have tailor-made, approaches, because then some people will feel intimidated, because if you meet community members and the chief is present, there are people who are going to shy away. There are people who cannot say certain things because they feel those things might be, sensitive. So you really want to create opportunities. So I mentioned the fact that I grouped them into their identifiable groupings. So women's group, persons with disability, men's group, and all of that, so that everybody would feel comfortable within their group to be able to express their opinions and all of that. And when it came to the issue about challenges of COVID, for instance, this question really wants to show how, as a leader, you have been able to navigate the challenge of COVID. Is it that when COVID struck, all of us went back to sleep because there's a global pandemic and we were not innovative enough to find new ways to do our job? No. So this question is asking you, throughout those accomplishments that you've made, probably it was in the era of COVID. So how were you able to navigate the challenge of COVID, for instance? I don't know if this question is still going to be the same post-COVID. Last part had to do with situations where you've worked with people from diverse backgrounds, identities, or perspectives, and how you use your leadership skills to resolve conflict. As I said earlier, always try to read the questions very carefully. If you do not understand certain terms, look them up, look for the definitions, Google. And, so for me, when I got to this question, I went straight forward and I researched on conflict resolution. Okay, so I understood exactly what conflict resolution was and all of that. Then I started thinking about, examples of a time where I actually did something in relation to resolving conflicts amongst community members. And again, I stuck to community participation. So I gave an example of when we were, engaging some market people when we had built a new market for them and we were trying to relocate them to a new market. People are, not very comfortable with change when they are actually used to, selling at a particular place. So yeah, practical examples like that. Don't just Google and then just give, a narrative about what, conflict resolution is without tying it to what specifically you and your team have done in resolving a particular conflict. The next one has to do with PDE. So if you intend to do PDE, this is really tied to the question number 2, based on your understanding of the preferred track and all of that, the knowledge that you seek to gain. So if you want to do PDE, for instance, you want to intern with a particular organization and you want to learn how they also do their stuff, build some professional skills to improve on the services that you deliver or the work that you do back home. So basically that is what it is. And so overall, I would advise that you stick to one thematic area and answer all the questions according to that area of focus that you have for yourself, because then even if you get in, you are going to have one focus project that you are going to work on throughout the fellowship. So you have so many accomplishments, but I don't advise that you touch on almost everything. No, that really doesn't help. I advise you to spend more time on the website of the fellowship, for instance, and read all the necessary documents that you have to read. Sometimes it helps you in understanding certain context. Okay, it's not just about going to the application portal alone. Read almost everything that you come across about the fellowship. That is what I did, for instance, and I think it helped me in even the way I wrote my answers. Okay, because you come across certain jargons, you come across certain words, you come across a certain context, okay, which will help you, get a deeper meaning of, the whole fellowship experience and what they are requiring of you to do. So spend more time. If there's any resource, read it. I mean, I was reading almost everything. I don't think there's any YouTube video I didn't watch about this fellowship. I watched almost everything, fellowship experiences, and I mean, not even just the application process, but fellowship experiences, because when people are sharing their experiences, you'll be able to tell that, okay, so this is what the civic engagement will give you. This is what the public engagement, management track will give you. This is what the business leadership track will give you. So you'll be able to then answer these questions based on experiences of other fellows, within those tracks. Then you are really spot on. Okay.